In our previous discussion on social policy, we examined the meaning of policy and other important terms that go with the subject. We also examined the importance of policy, or why organizations or institutions or even governments have policies in such sectors. Our discussion today, we want to look at the characteristics and types of policies. Studies have generally shown that policies have certain elements that are common to all of them, or common features. So today, we want to look at some of these features. Again, we want to look at the types of policies. Studies have similarly found that regardless of how many policies that exist in society, they can be grouped into 4 major types. And these are some of the ones that we are going to examine. One of the main characteristics of social policies is that social policies, or the making of a social policy, is a complex process. It involves many components which are interconnected by communication, feedback, and which also interact in different ways. For example, in making policies, institutions, organizations, or governments may wish to consult industrial workers, voters, the academia, the legislatures, the bureaucrats, or those who work in government, political parties, executives of political parties, the judiciary, among others. These organs become important when policies are being made, because if they are not adequately consulted and give consent to various provisions that are contained in the policy, they may reject the policies that eventually come out. And that might make the implementation of such policies quite difficult. Members of Parliament, for instance, may declare certain policies as not being in tandem with certain legislations. Courts might also pronounce themselves to these policies by either affirming their constitutionality or rejecting their constitutionality. It is therefore important that all sectors are engaged when policies are being made. And the engagement is normally back and forth, and this is why we say that policy-making process is quite complex. Some parts of the process, when we're making policies, are explicit, that they are open and directly observable, but many others proceed through hidden channels that the officials themselves are often only partly aware of. Indeed, consultations with certain sectors may take place through correspondences. Others are done in open gatherings through open forums, and others are invited to give expert opinions or undertake empirical studies to establish whether the problems that society face can be addressed without policy, or they require the enactment of policy. So in sum, the policy-making process is quite complex. It is difficult. It involves the engagement of several people from one stage to the other, and also both openly and in a hidden manner. The other characteristics of social policy is that it is a dynamic process. It is a dynamic process, which means that policy-making process changes. For instance, problems that a given policy sought to address, say in the 1990s, may have evolved over time, and therefore the policies that were meant then may not be adequate in addressing them. Consequently, institutions and organizations and even governments must come on board to look into ways of changing existing policies or coming up with completely new ones to address emerging problems. Again, it might also mean that from time to time, policies are changed or modified so that they can address problems that exist and can address issues to do with the engagement of stakeholders, because stakeholders might also change. Others might emerge. Resources that are required to implement certain policies might also be more, given not only the complexity, but also the increase in the number of people that perhaps a given policy sought to address some time back. Today, as we speak, there have been a lot of debate in Kenya as to whether the funding of university education is adequate and whether all problems that exist in our university setting, the current funding model can adequately cater for. The debate has often been that there is need for university fees to be increased from the current 16,000 to about 48,000. Indeed, in early 90s, when the current fee guidelines were formulated, it is possible that the problems that universities were going through then could easily be handled, given by the amount that was proposed then. But over the years, problems have emerged. A lot of issues that were perhaps not envisaged then now exist. Issues such as ICT, that has become an important component of learning, wasn't there. And because of the new realities, it is important that certain policies are examined. That's why we say that the policy-making process is a dynamic process. It changes. Problems change, both in scale as well as in complexity. And that might require constant modification of policies so as to address problems that emerge. The other characteristic of policies is that they are multi-layered. That is, public policy formulation often involves a great variety of substructures. The identity of these substructures and the degree of their involvement in policy making vary because of different issues, circumstances, and even societal values. These structures also make different contributions in policy making and as well as implementation. This characteristic of social policy suggests that every substructure makes a different and sometimes unique contribution to public policy. Furthermore, a policy also has within it different layers such as resource mobilization, administration, accountability, monitoring, as well as evaluation. When we talk of substructures in a policy setting, what we mean are the different stakeholders. They are those that are in charge of formulation of policies. They are those that will ensure that the policy is accepted. Then there are those that will ensure that the policy is well resourced in terms of funding and therefore implemented. And then there are those institutions that are ready to address any conflict that might either arise in terms of interpreting certain sections of policies or in terms of implementing it. That's why it is important that different layers in policy-making process are engaged, because from time to time, they may be required. If, for instance, those who formulate policies do not adequately consult those who will be responsible for funding it. Again, do not engage in institutions such as Parliament and others that are important in legitimizing the policy. Then the implementation of such policies can face certain roadblocks that might make it completely difficult to address some of the issues that it was established to address. So it is important that when policies are being made, policymakers must recognize, one, the fact that there are certain layers or certain structures or certain stakeholders that are important when policies are being made. But secondly, and most importantly, they need to engage and adequately consult these layers so that any fears they have, any issues they have regarding policies, they can bring it forth so that a candid and open discussion is done to ensure that at the time the policies are being implemented, then there are no conflicts or objection to either the entire policy or certain sections of the policy. As I noted earlier, social policies can be categorized into different types. And these types are basically four. One is what we call substantive policies. Substantive policies are those that are concerned with the general welfare and development of society. These policies are formulated to address broader socioeconomic problems affecting the wider society. The policies have vast areas of operation affecting the general welfare and development of society as a whole. They include policy programs such as those in the area of provision of education and employment opportunities, economic stabilization, law and order enforcement, anti-pollution legislation, among others. Today, we talk of education policy in Kenya that covers kindergarten, primary, secondary, tertiary, as well as university education. So policies that address an entire sector of society are the ones that we call substantive policies. Again, you say we have policies on employment that again talk about the entire sector of employment, not necessarily a given sector within the economy. Then again, we shall call that a particular type of policy substantive. For instance, a policy that addresses issues in agriculture generally without being specific to a subsector of agriculture. Those policies qualify as substantive policies. Policies, again, that deal with security in general without delving into the specific aspects of provision of security. We shall again categorize such policies as substantive. So substantive policies are those policies that seek to address an issue that affect the entire society in general. The other type of social policy is called regulatory policies. Regulatory policies are policies that are made by the government to regulate the conduct, operations, and activities in such sectors such as trade, business, safety, health, public utilities, among others. Regulatory policies is done or they are made by independent organizations that work on behalf of the government. In Kenya, for instance, we have Insurance Regulatory Authority to regulate the activities regarding the establishment of insurance companies as well as insurance brokers. Again, they also regulate compensation, among other things, that occur in the insurance sector. We have Communication Authority, again, that has policies regarding mobile phone communication and radio activities. They license and they ensure that certain ethical issues are observed at all times. We have Independent Police Oversight Authority, again, that regulates the conduct of police and ensures that excesses of the police are properly investigated and the perpetrators brought to book. National Transport and Safety Authority, again, seeks to address issues of human safety within the transport sector. Central Bank of Kenya ensures that there is proper regulation of monetary policies, among others. Commission for University Education also is established to ensure that the management and running and establishment of courses and implementation of academic programs at the university level are properly implemented and according to the regulations that exist. These organizations have developed policies to regulate the conduct of individuals and institutions while providing services to the public. Maybe there's what we call NACADA, again regulates the establishment, the operations, among other activities within the alcoholic and drinks sector. So when you talk about regulatory policies, there are those policies that seek to ensure that certain standards, certain safety, and certain ethical values are practiced and observed in a given sector. The other type of policies called distributive policies. These are policies which are designed to address social problems affecting a specific segment of society. The policy can be the area, say, of funding of university education, provision of primary health care, adult education program, food relief, and social assistance for vulnerable populations, such as the elderly and the orphans. Therefore, any policy which is developed to address a given segment of society, say women, children, persons with disability, or students in institutions of higher learning, are all part of what we call distributive policies. For example, we have policies that talk about admission of students within the university, and these policies provide certain preferential treatment to students from marginalized communities and arid and semi-arid areas. Again, preferential treatment is also offered to female students so that their admission to the university is at a slightly lower marks than those of the boys or students from other areas that are not classified as ASAL or marginalized. So a policy that has been enacted to address issues that affect a given segment of society and not the entire society, such policies are categorized as distributive policies. The last set of policy or type of policy is called redistributive. Redistributive policies are concerned with the rearrangement of policies which are concerned with bringing about basic social and economic changes. Certain public goods and welfare services are disproportionately divided among certain segments of society, which have to be streamlined through redistributive policies. For instance, in Kenya, there are policies on entry grades to the university for male and female students, students from ASAL regions for various courses, appointment of women to public office, among others. In these policies, female students are given preferential treatment in university admission, appointment to public offices as a way of addressing the historical marginalization that they have faced over the years. The creation of women-only position in the Constitution, the one we call women rep, is also an example of redistributive policy. The policy recognizes the fact that women have historically been marginalized when it comes to political leadership. And because of this, it is important that policies are set aside to encourage their participation in political governance. For this reason, women-only position was created that is contested by women, so that at the end of the day, we ensure that the winner is going to be a woman. The policy came into being on recognition of the fact that competition between men and women always favor men because of patriarchy and also advantages that men face in society. And therefore, putting men and women to compete on the same level disadvantages women. And so, it was important that certain preferential treatment is offered to women to give them certain leeway so that they are able to win certain contests on their own. Those are the types of social policies that we have. In summary, we have looked at the various characteristics of social policies. We have also looked at the various types of policies. In our next discussion, we shall examine the goals and principles of social policy.